Hello and welcome to the UnWokable podcast. I am joined, and I'm your host, Mark Owsley, but I am so excited to have today the purveyor of the Twitter account and social media account MythinformedMKE, Brian Edwards, joining me today. Thank you so much for being here, Brian.
Hi, how's it going? Glad to have me. Yes, I'm a purveyor apparently of misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation.
Yeah, well, Brian is also what Brian is a free speech advocate, and he has been doing gatherings, conventions. It's a 501c3 promoted free speech across the country for events. The last one I saw was in Fort Worth, or that's the one closest to me. So it was the one. But
did you go to that one?
No, I didn't get to go. I've not yet been able to make it to any of your events, so I'm hoping to do that soon as you do it. But it's Better Discourses is the actual.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun. Yeah, Better Discourse is the trade name at betterdiscourseevent.com. Right now it will show the last one that's already over, but when we get the new one up and running, which will probably be in October, that conference, we'll probably have that website up in a month or so. Awesome. We'll get the new one going. Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, for those of I have a pretty decent local audience that may not be on Twitter, but I want them to understand why I brought Brian on. I want you guys to understand that Brian had a Twitter account under the moniker MythinformedMKE, and it recently got nuked. It got taken down. And this has been something that's been happening on Twitter for a while. We see the same thing on Facebook. We see the same thing on Instagram. But Brian, can you just give us an idea of, first, what kind of content you were usually posting on your account? And then what led to you being suspended permanently from Twitter, or so they say?
Yeah, so most of what Myth-informed, what that comes from is that we're informed often by narrative myths. So that's the idea of myth-informed, that often this is religion too. You can have a narrative myth arc. Every religion's got its own creation story, and not that there's no value in myths at all. There is, but if you're informed only by your mythos and you're not engaging with other creation stories or other things, then you're probably not informed. So that's what Myth-informed would do. But we would post a lot of things. Things that make you question the narrative. So part of it was a vaccine audience, right? There were other doctors besides, say, Eric Topol and who is it, Eric Fingelding, that would go out there, Dr. Fauci, saying the same thing, breaking down the science. But you have Peter McCullough, Mary Bowden, Pierre Corey from Wisconsin. You have Paul Merrick, all of these guys, Ryan Cole, that are saying, there's another way to look at this too. And I've worked in medicine my whole life, and doctors that are good friends within their own practice, subspecialty practice, do not agree on how to proceed. So the idea that there was any consensus about, or that there was this huge consensus about a brand new novel virus, I knew was BS. There's not, the only consensus in medicine is on the stuff that's like 20 years old. Right? Yeah. Not any of the current stuff. So I kind of knew that was BS. So that's part of it. The other part is, I guess you could call us anti-woke. A lot of the narrative on privilege, this stuff, again, it's all narrative. It's like a myth arc. It's misunderstood often too. Maybe there's some narrative value into it, but as a factual case that you can somehow assign something like, what's the test from Harvard? Implicit bias, right? That you could measure this in some scientific way. Come on, that's absolutely certain. And then it's implicit bias, but it doesn't have anything to do with explicit bias. So, I mean, that's crazy.
Except that it seems to create an explicit bias.
That's what they say. But you could know that something is ugly and smells bad and not say it ever. Yeah. Right. So the idea that it's an explicit bias that would have an effect on your, that's not proven. So, and then part of this will still bounce into religion. I'd say, 40% of our audience is, say, maybe 40% is a vaccine audience, 55% is an anti-woke audience. We still have 5% of the audience left over from when we used to talk about religion. So there's kind of the remnants of the atheist community after Conservapedia says we ruined it.
We destroyed it.
Destroyed it.
Well,
yes.
and you kind of go back all the way to James from the new atheist movement in that area of things, right? Or is that?
Yes, yeah. In fact, so MythCon, we now brand under Better Discourse. We branded under MythCon, and that was always a religion-focused conference up until most of it. MythCon 5 probably wasn't, but always we'd be looking at the historicity of Jesus. Is he real? Is he not? You bring the best scholars to say, yes, he is, and then no, he's not. So we've always done this point counterpoint. We don't want to just say this is how it is. So we had Bart Ehrman debate, Richard Price, and that was an excellent debate on religion. Then we got into big trouble when we brought Thomas Smith, who is a progressive podcaster, to talk to Gasp, Sargon of Akkad, aka Carl Benjamin. And then it went wild. The narrative was, I think, let me see if I can remember the newspaper article exactly. Atheists to, I think it was a blog article, but anti-SJWs to receive strategic platform within atheism. Right? Read that in. Anti-SJWs to receive strategic platform within atheism at MythCon. See, this is a contaminant, right?
Yeah.
This is the way to look at it. This is, we are allowing a non-priest into the sacristy. It's something where it would be, you're wearing normal clothes instead of the white robe at Mecca, right? You've got it, that this is something impure. So the fact that we are allowing anti-SJW thought, and the thing is, it was a debate, right? That booed us out. The other people that they were upset about were Armored Skeptic and Shoe on Head, because they weren't woke enough.
Well, and nobody ever is. But I think that's kind of the point. And just for everybody, full disclosure to you, I'm a Christian, but I think that underscores the issue that kind of happened. It's happening in the churches now, and it happened in I think the new atheist or the atheist movement early on, was that you had kind of this new secular religion spring up and start to take over movements, and so can you just hit on that, because I've not really talked to anybody about that before, because I think my audience would see that it has taken over some of this, especially the mainline denominations.
So our atheists, even though we're kind of in that atheist community, we're always a little different, because our makeup, we had a local group that would meet up here, as well as we kind of do these regional and national conferences, but 15 to 20% Christian attendance was not uncommon. So we would actively try to seek them out. We'd want to platform them to do debates and so on and so forth. And we try to get a mixed audience, because you don't want to be like the, 2 or 3 Christians with 100 people that are atheists, right? That's not fair. You want to mix the audience. If you got a big enough minority, you don't feel outnumbered. So they would come a lot. So, because I would collect emails, and she's like, well, I don't want to give you my email. And this I'm like, give me your email. And she's like, it's nightforchrist@yahoo.com. I'm like, okay, that's a great email. That's fine. You're allowed to be part of our group, because the point is, we wanted to investigate. We're not telling you what to think. It was just an open space to talk. But certainly what happened, it happened at Elevator Gate. So in 2011, did you hear about that?
Yeah.
Sorry, I might need to get a glass of water. In 2011, hang on, let me quick grab.
Yeah, go ahead. I can cut.
My apologies, that's rude, but
no, it's okay.
Physical problem. Anyways, there was a Elevator Gate. Did you hear about it?
Yes. Yeah, I've heard about it, but my audience.
No, for the audience to add in here, a woman named Rebecca Watson, who she would blog under Skeptic. They were in Dublin, Ireland. It was like a World Atheist Conference. Richard Dawkins was there. A lot of the big names. They have this big party. Basically, she's on her way up to her hotel room, on the 8th floor or something, at 4 something in the morning. People have been partying all night. And this guy's kind of like talks to her. She gets on and he says, hey, I really liked your talk, blah, blah, blah. Would you like to talk more about what you said, with me in my room for coffee? So, this is like partially a proposition, partially maybe he was being legit, but that's, you're meeting a girl you haven't really talk to all night, your roommate said,
Right.
that's a come on. Anyways, she said, no, I'm not going to do that. And he said, okay, that's fine. And then she gets off at floor 5 and he goes to 6 or whatever it was. Nothing happened. But what she said was, guys, don't confront like women in the elevator like this. Now, he wasn't trapping her. He wasn't, he accepted the no as soon as she said it. Now, I agree with her in so much as, yes, it's probably not the time to get on her. Like that is probably going to make a woman uncomfortable. I get that. But the way she phrased it was like, don't do that. Like there was all this sexism stuff going on. At least he took a no means no. And so forth. But anyways, for whatever reason, that split the community over the treatment of women and sexism. So you had social justice. So it wasn't just feminism, right? Like, yeah, it's probably a bad call to get on a chicken elevator at 4 a.m. But at the same time, the feminism that they wanted to insert was radical, all the patriarchy stuff. And it just split the atheist community. A small group called Atheism Plus like sprung out. And these were the diehard, all the radicals. They quickly consumed themselves in a ball of fire within like 3 months and it was gone. And then, things were quote unquote normal, but rather than like spinning off their own group was unpopular, no, they would just kind of infect the main group. By 2016, that was the narrative. And it was really hard to be anything other than a progressive atheist group. And God forbid, what we had was like, oh, people that would hang out and talk with right wingers. Like that was absolutely
unacceptable.
banned. The last person, like Dave Rubin, who was still, I guess, technically among the left, spoke at the Reason rally in 2016. But by 2016, most of the atheist people were talking about politics. They weren't talking about atheism anymore. And the thing is, it doesn't give them purpose. Atheism is not a purpose-based concept. Religion is. So social justice is what gives them purpose. In fact, if you look at the UU Church, the University Unitarian Church, they actually say that they want to get to a theology of social justice. It's right there that's not me making that up. It's straight from their
liberation theology.
People that joined that. And it was interesting to see people that had left fundamentalist Mormon and JW religions to kind of join our very wide open group, then migrate over to social justice, because sometimes it's more comfortable to be told exactly what to do and think, I think.
So let me get this straight. You had people that were atheists now joining a Unitarian church that's preaching social or liberation theology, or what, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, because Unitarian 10 years ago were just kind of like atheists that like to get together and do like sing songs and stuff, right?
Oh, I see.
But that changed around 15 or 16, or I think it was, you got Trayvon in 12, Michael Brown in 14, and then it was running.
Yeah, and that is true. And I'm from right around Columbia, Missouri, so I started studying this stuff when it happened, and it was a very pervasive thing on the campuses. That's when I first started to see it on the campuses.
Yeah,
I think you had Yale at the same time.
Yeah, but the Tigers. That remember that woman that the professor that's like, can I get some muscle over here? Kick that guy off campus that was recording. Yeah, so you had a teacher threatening a student for filming in a public place. I think she eventually did get fired, but that was in 15. That was all of this stuff. By 16, I think the UU was woke. I got kicked out of the UU church one time because we have to do. I'm Catholic, so we had to. They do this communion service, and they were saying something to people, and I got up there and I could realize what when I was 10 paces away. They were asking, "What are you thankful for? What are you thankful for? What do you?" And then somebody had to say, "And you get your piece of bread and stuff." And I'm like, should I say it? Should I say it? And then I get up there and I said, Donald Trump.
Oh, no.
They did not find it funny.
I
wasn't immediately kicked out, but I was told not to come back.
That's so interesting. Well, I want to unpack that a little bit, because I would say this. There's the Christian side of the argument, okay? And I think it's a little bit defeated on what's happening in the mainstream churches. But I would say, and I've heard them say, that the atheism movement got swallowed up so quickly and so early because you all lack a firm belief system. And you can, and would you find that true? I mean, is that
so?
Hold on, just has that changed your view of atheism at all in terms of maybe?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
okay.
I never expected atheism to be applicable to the general public. And I thought it was, say, maybe applicable that like 5% of the population could be okay with atheism. I actually think it's probably less now. It's probably like closer to 1%. That it's important, since atheism doesn't ground you, you're going to have to really be to leave religion and be able to do it without kind of losing your footing. I think you're going to have to be grounded in your career, whether your father, like a whole lot of things, like your kids, like your hobbies, all of that. If you're good there, you'll probably be okay. But man, if you're looking for meaning, the atheism is a terrible place to go.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think that's right. But I see it right now. You have this now influx of, and I'm going to take this down another pathway that I didn't even say I was going to, but it's very interesting to me, because you see a lot of the recent Supreme Court decision saying, you have to treat religious schools and public schools the same. But you also have with that, and I don't think that's a necessarily bad thing, except how it might be used in policy, which could be a dangerous thing. But you also see the kind of other push from the other side saying we need to get religion back into schools. And I'm a little split, because I have, and James and I have talked about this, James Lindsay and I have talked about this before, that a way to defeat wokeness would be to kind of invoke the separation of church and state, because it operates like a religion. It operates under those same aspects. But it worries me to see whether it's Christian right, you could say the Islamic right, you could say, or the Islamic fundamentalism, kind of trying to push its way back in as a way to knock out wokeness. And that worries me. And so I would like to hear your perspective on that from the atheist, because obviously you were an atheist. So you were, I would imagine, I'm assuming, separation of church and state, no prayer in schools kind of way of thinking about it. Do you, as you've progressed in saying, okay, maybe atheism got taken over for those who didn't believe or weren't believers in anything, do you think that it's a good thing to instill Christian values via religion now in schools?
Yeah, my conception of atheism was never like, oh wow, let's be hardcore and get everything out of schools. The idea that in God we trust shouldn't be on the money was like always the stupidest thing. Like, who gives a shit? You know, why do we care about this? Like the whole idea of separation of church and state, that was the letter, right? That Thomas Jefferson wrote. It's not actually in the Constitution, because the Baptists of Danbury were being oppressed by the Congregationalists of Danbury, Connecticut. So like he wanted a wall. Now I get that as a theory, right? But wokeness, again, you're right, operates as religion. But what else is religion? Is Bushido a religion? Certainly affected the culture like it's one, right? You know, the Japanese in that war were like everybody else, but even more so. You know, that they always doing things to that next level. But culturally, if you see what happened to them in the 1920s, all of this was pushed in schools. So if you wonder how you're getting people that are absolutely wanting to die in bonsai charges, mothers giving ceremonial knives to their 18-year-old and said, if you get captured, use this on yourself. That's a crazy thing to do. How do you get that? It's all the education system prior to that. So yeah, just a wall between church and state isn't going to do it. You have to promote like the pluralistic value system that you're allowed to do that. And some people are going to call that ideology. Fine, I don't care. You're going to have to push the reason why we're good, because we don't have ideologies. But it's so hard. Like, what's an ideology?
Yeah,
you know?
Well, an ideology is a belief system that is, but I think that's where there is merit to the conservative argument of there are better belief systems than others, or at least in terms of, what it produces, the good in the society, and say what you want. There's a lot to say about what I think the Christian right has done to itself, especially since the 1970s, 1980s, because it's been commercialized, right? And I think that's become an issue, and a lot of the reason that you would have people come out against it. And it's a reason why I've had issues with Christianity, because it's become a televangelist driven enterprise that is a lot designed to make money, right? But I want to get
And be
this into-
entertaining, you know?
Yes, no,
Like,
and that is the other part of it, is that
like, how is
if you-
Benny Hinn any different than like WWF in some ways, right? It's dramatic and wild and
right.
you know.
It's absolutely not. And you saw, and I came up in that generation. Okay. And I came up in my parents were the Word of Faith movement coming out of the 70s and the 80s, and Benny Hinn and Kenneth Copeland and all of those guys. And I watched them fleece my parents when they had nothing. And so that was part of what happened. I am a Christian. My faith is mine. But I also saw how a belief system can be manipulated, right? Into doing destruction to those who they say they serve. And so getting into, I want to take that point and kind of morph it into why you got booted off of Twitter, because I think you were attacking what has become a moralistic belief system. And I don't want to say attacking, you were highlighting. That is a better word. You were actually
it's highlighting.
showing. You weren't attacking. You just said, hey, you were showing what was going on. And so can you explain that to us? What happened?
So the tweet was, there was a man in the street video that was going around a pride parade saying, hey, you know, there are kids kind of dancing scantily clad in adult clubs, receiving money as if they are strippers. And like, there's BDSM going on in front of something supposed to be family friendly. Are you down with that? That was the video. One of the guys even said, he goes, I'm down with the kink for kids, which is creepy. And then another guy said that, you know, he didn't see much different. He goes, yeah, well, that sounds like what strippers have done that in a long time. And then he goes, yeah, I don't see a whole lot of problem with it. Okay, whatever. That was a highlight. However, in that the creator showed a picture of a Guardian article, newspaper article that referenced Desmond is amazing. That, and he's the trans, right? Because they were talking about that. They were talking specifically about Desmond with the dollars and so on and so forth. So that was enough for a DMCA claim by the mother. So Devin's mother.
Explain the DMCA.
So the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. So if you have a copyrighted picture, of which there was in the Guardian article, she's saying you can't show that. I didn't give my consent for you to show that. She also claimed that we're collecting information on minors. That's a bizarre claim.
Interesting.
But the Twitter says, yeah, like this is a DM. This is her copyrighted material since she's, you know, he's a minor or whatever. Okay, fine. Like this is fair use though. You wouldn't be able to report on anything, right? Donald Trump could just tell CNN, you don't have the right to use my picture. Like, you can't do that. That's fair use. That's a reporting. We hadn't monetized this. We weren't stealing any money from her. So it fits in square use, but you have biased arbitrators. Remember that Stalin had judges. Do you think you're going to get a fair hearing though? So we had judges at Twitter that judged us to be in violation of DMCA, and they took it down. But then they also canceled the account because they said, well, you have had multiple violations. Well, one of them was from years ago where there's some music in the background. So we just took that down because it picks up. It was just some copyrighted song. We didn't know it was playing in the background. And then the other was we tweeted a dirty phrase called, we said, ivermectin saves lives. Those 3 words, ivermectin saves lives. And that was considered malinformation. And that way we were punished for that. So in totality, they said this account is not doing well. So they killed it.
So they killed you. Well, and I think it's interesting that they brought up the whole minor issue. I
mean, that was just in the complaint. So the Twitter didn't say that, but the DMCA is a legal claim because you're making a legal copyright, because it'll say under penalty of perjury, I proclaim so on and so forth. So we were able to see exactly what she wrote in the claim. And it is, I'm the mother of this person. I own the copyright. The child can't consent. So I'm the copyright holder and don't want them to collect information on minors. It wasn't evidence, but this is my thing. They showed it, take it down. And
you were
there
gone.
you go.
Well, so, and I do want to point out here, your attorney's Ron Coleman, right?
Yes. So we put up a Give, Send, Go to collect some money to, see if we can get it back, because it's not like hate speech. Hate speech is completely arbitrary concept, and Twitter is the final judge. But since this actually has some legal basis to it, we felt like we'll fight this, and had had Ron help us.
Do you have any hope that Elon's takeover of Twitter is going to restore you?
Could,
if they don't?
if it happens, I really do think that it will help. Yes. So my skepticism lies in the fact that the deal won't go through. Something's going to be wrong, and that kind of thing. I find it really hard to believe that Twitter is. I mean, it's worth what, 40 billion or whatever,
44 or something like that.
Okay, but it's not a profit-making machine. Twitter's real value is in all the soft power, right? The Saudis use it to sneak in and unmask their dissidents and execute them or jail them. Twitter can be used in so many ways for soft power. There's so many governments that would really want to, keep the loyal part of it. I don't think Elon's going to be loyal in that way. And so that's why
you think a lot like me. You think a lot like me on this, and I've shared this sparingly because it seems to be an unpopular opinion, and it's not really worth a. But Elon, I've long thought that there's no way they're going to allow him to take Twitter from them. That there's going to be some kind of push or something at the end or something that scuttles it because of exactly what you're talking about, that it's used sometimes very artificially to influence a conversation in a certain direction here in this country and outside. And they do that largely by, I think, in taking in ideas of whether it's free speech or other ideas from outside the country, kind of global mindset when it comes to American ideas, and actually applying them here within that company to say, okay, if you have I don't know, how big was your account?
85,000.
So you had 85,000, a big account, right? You had a lot of people following you. You could influence the conversation. You could make waves with that kind of account. Well, if Twitter has seemed to take the notion, and obviously you were. Let's go to the ivermectin part where you had to have that taken down, which is more applicable to what I'm talking about. They said no, and the other countries have this notion of free speech that's much more limited than America's notion of free speech or America's laws on free speech when it comes to the Constitution. So my thought has been that Twitter there's something that's going to happen or something that's going to scuttle this, and Elon probably won't fight it at that point, and then we're all up a creek, or they would just, nuke it somehow. But going back to what I just said about free speech, would you consider yourself a free speech absolutist, that in the notion of, Twitter and other like companies serving as the public square should be able to, anybody on there within obvious, I think there's reason to this, but very small, to say what you want, and without.
I guess I'm not sure. Free speech absolutist. It's just a tough word. I prefer free speech maximalist. So okay. I want to maximize the amount that we can do. Like certain parts, you can convince me that a small fringe. Like I really like what Elon says. If the 10% of the hard left or the 10% of the hard right are equally unhappy, you've got a good moderation content policy. So fair enforcements, whether it's stricter, I like it looser, but I can empathize with certain things that they have going on that they don't want to. Especially in, like, it wasn't at Facebook, it wasn't Twitter. They get this stuff in Malaysia, and then you have existing tribal issues that we have tribal politics in the United States, but we don't have like inter-creed tribe. And this was straight up leading to things like gang warfare, except for this was like on mothers and kids. It was pretty wild. So I can see, that there might need to be some kind of content moderation, fine, but applied equally and try to maximize what you can say.
Yeah, well, but I completely agree. Obviously, you don't want calls for violence. You don't want people being targeted. You don't want any. It's kind of like pornography, right? You know it when you see it, but it seems like that definition is being encroached further and further in, and
it really is
on one side. And so, that
I don't know where that line is, but you could convince me that there is a line, that there's something that would be covered under free speech that might be okay to censor on social. But I don't think that ivermectin saves lives is certainly one, because that's a straight up true statement. Yes, it'd be like saying Hitler didn't beat his wife. Oh, are you saying he's a good guy?
Right.
Like, like, I don't know if he beat his wife or not, but let's say that he didn't, like, I'm not implying anything other than that. You're just saying that. And that's the problem with you true statements being interpreted and, well, somebody could read it as such. That's a huge problem.
Well, and that seems to be the kind of woke modus operandi of constantly taking people's statements out of context, or constantly, because that's what it is, a contextual issue.
And this is what the drag thing is. The drag kids right now are radioactive. So one, we got banned because you have an activist mother, and she's particular, that half of it is straight up her. But the other part is, had we been pro drag kids, I'm sure we don't get the DMCA claim. I'm sure we don't get the boot. Right now, anything going against this, kind of normalizing this, is considered excluding and hate speech. So that's what's weird. Like, it's heavy metal, for example. Like, do you want to normalize that around? Like, well, it should be legal, that you shouldn't stop people from going, but it's okay to say, wow, we shouldn't play like heavy metal around a bunch of 3-year-olds that might get scared by it. That's fine to say. And but anything against this is considered harmful, creating a harmful environment.
What do you think?
And drag kids, it's big. Yeah.
Well, what do you think the goal is behind this? I mean, because it wasn't that long ago that none of us none of us would say, okay, kids need to be going to drag shows. All right. Adults, fine, you do you, right? You're over 18, you do. What do you think is behind this notion that we should expose kids at an earlier and earlier age to this kind of content, to this kind of
well, I mean, it's both. You have true believers, right? I think the people that are really woke, that really believe it, I think they honestly do, but they believe that this is actually a good thing for society, good thing for those kids. We're helping them out, stopping the bully, that kind of thing. Like, I could see a person washing their hands with antibacterial soap all the time, wanting to be most clean, but then you also are contributing to the resistivity of bacteria as a whole. So I think that some of these people think, well, the benefit to the non-bullying or the inclusion outweighs the thing to free speech. So I think that, I don't agree with it, but I think that's where they're coming from. I think a smaller subset absolutely do want to push it. You were talking with James Lindsay, and I don't know if you reviewed that paper. I think it was 2006, about queering the classroom with drag kids. Yeah, that explains a lot of this. They want to do this. They want to knock out notions of gender. So if you are this kind of radical left constructionist, or the socially constructed theory kind of person, I can absolutely see why this fits in your worldview. But I mean, what you're doing is a little bit like that what was Akhenaten, that Egyptian pharaoh that wiped out all the other gods and tried to put just as one god. You're really disrupting society, and that's just not good. Well, and I think like maybe he really believed that only the sun god should be worshipped, but as soon as he was gone, they all went back to worshiping all the regular gods. You don't want to disrupt society like that.
Well, and I think that's been an issue for our society, especially since Donald Trump started, right? I mean, since 2015, 2016, it's just been this very quick push, this very fast moving, we've got to do it now. If we don't do it now, someone like Donald Trump is going to be, come in here and take it all away from us. So we have to push it down the road. But I always say progressivism progresses, right? And I think we got a peek into where they've always wanted to go, at least those who are the ideologues, those who really believe this. And
where do you think the media is? Because maybe they're just hucksters, right? If you've got a bad product that's hurting people or whatever, it's just, fake beans, magic beans, you're always going to find a huckster that's going to sell it. Yeah. I look at the media as more like hucksters. They don't really care if this works, but this is the narrative. They're going to make money off this. They get people all fired up about, oh, magic beads. Yep. $20 a bean. And they're selling it. Like, some of them I might believe it, but the way they shift the narrative so often and just go along, oh, now the lab leak's okay to talk about it. That to me, that sounds like, no, these are huckster like salesmen.
Well, and that is, I always think and talk about the meat grinder of history. They're when you talk about the Industrial Revolution, you talk about the way that war progressed with technology, and World War I was a primary example of this, that you had them, especially at the beginning, trying to fight a war with machine guns like like they were fighting a war, before machine guns and with smoothbores and things.
And
like
you
that.
also have way more people. The armies are way, way bigger than they were before. Napoleon's armies were way bigger, but like compare, the World War I armies to say 200 years before that, and they're, man,
well, not even 200 years,
400 times bigger. It's massive.
Right. But I see social media, the 24-hour news cycle, the injection of this literally into our pockets, right? Of this constant stream of information, incentivizing, it's kind of another meat grinder. And I feel like children right now with the gender ideology, with even critical race theory in schools and all the things that comprise wokeness are a part of this kind of meat grinder that we haven't caught up to yet. We're kind of in this transition where, and gender ideology, it being pushed the way it is being connected to exactly what you were talking about, the monetization of what's in your pocket and this information. And they have very much thrown kids under that bus, and down to the way that they market these ideas as a moral good on the platforms that are attracting kids.
Well, maybe you're, if we're using your World War II analogy, right? Because the body count's way bigger in World War II than it is one. But if you look at percentage of civilians that die versus military deaths,
right?
You have more in World War I, you have primarily soldiers dying more, like you have a lot more of those than civilians. But in World War II, you have more civilians dying than soldiers.
Yeah.
So it's the reverse, and sometimes quite a bit more. So so the analogy for me is like, there's a partisan, like politics has always been a partisan sport, right? It always has. It always has been this way the whole life. Southern editors of newspapers were depicted with a quill in one hand and a gun in the other, because they would, write an editorial and then somebody would challenge them to a duel, right? So that's partisanship. We've always had that. But the whole of America, how much are we digesting? So I think there's a lot of normies, people that weren't all that political or only a little. Everybody has to do it. And it's almost impossible to be apolitical now. Before that was, there's always a third or 40% of the country that didn't vote. Like, I kind of admired them. I'm like, these are the chill, cool people. That's a good thing that they don't, because they're go along. Yeah, it's fine. They'll figure it out. I don't want to do that. But they have to be into politics now.
Yeah.
They don't have a lot of base. So this propaganda, it's got to be getting to them, that I don't like that everybody must participate.
Right. Well, the personal is political now. Right. And I think that you see that used to be a big divide between, say, religion and politics. There used to be that divide that you didn't talk about religion and politics. That wasn't something you brought up in polite conversation. But it was also the divide. By having that, don't talk about religion and politics, assumes that you can have friends that are cross politics and cross religion. And you probably shouldn't bring it up because you want to keep your friendship going. Right. Now, there's a big question on whether or not you should have that, whether that's okay at all, in fact, or bad. And it's not just in your voting thing. It's going to be coming to your workplace. What if you work for in the marketing department of a company that's not doing woke messaging? Yeah. It's going to hit you. That didn't used to happen. You could be working at an ABC widget company. You just made widgets, right? But you never had to message, all employees, we're going to make sure that you get $4,000 to travel the state lines for an abortion if you need that, This is wild. They shouldn't be involved in this kind of thing, or have to be involved. Let me ask you this, and this is kind of a crazy question, but do you think that there is James talks a lot about the WEF. I mean, that's right in your face. They say it, you can see it, there's lots of money behind it. Do you think that this is more organic, that this is us reacting to things as a population, or do you think that it's a top-down kind of push or a mix of the two?
Certainly there's people that are top-down pushing, right? Like the guy trying to hit a home run is trying to hit a home run. The question is he going to? How much is it? So when everyone's shoving, you just don't know. at what point when you put pressure on a house, does the foundation crack? You just don't know, right? You feel like it's under stress, but you really don't know if it can handle more weight or not. Like some point, snow builds up in the roof, it collapses. So they're certainly trying to do that. I don't know if they're having the biggest effect. I think that people are spooked. It's propaganda. I used to kind of laugh at it. We'd mock Goebbels, right? Yeah. And they would, and I'm like, who did that work on, right? I thought, man, this didn't work on anyone. These people are just afraid. But I think it did work on some people. I think it really did. And that's how you can at least justify some of this. So I do think a lot of people really think, wow, we're on the borderline of fascism, that January 6th is an erection. Wow, the country is really in trouble. I think you can spook people. COVID, yeah. Like I think you can really weaponize propaganda and get out of these normie people that were just the get along to go along crowd, which was great to have because they even out the two sides, right? They're the ones that say, shut up, you're both crazy, and they both have to pipe down. Now themselves are more spooked.
Well, let's talk about fascism.
Is the WF trying to spook them? Yeah, they're pushing their agenda. But so are a lot of other people.
Well, but let's talk about fascism for a second, because do you agree with the notion that fascism is a merger of state and corporate power? Yeah, I mean that is the real structure of what fascism is. And I'm in a red state, so I'm in Oklahoma, the reddest of red states, so they say. And this is literally the message from all of the establishment Republicans. There are no Democrats here of any influence. I mean, they're here, but they're small. But you see this constant push now of literally the messaging is a public-private partnership.
Yep.
In
the WF is especially saying that. Yes.
Yes. Well, but that's that I'm seeing.
But you're right. CEOs are saying that more. BlackRock is saying that more.
Yeah. And so are but I'm talking about the Republican politicians in Oklahoma. Yes. So like the governor and down and it's going into this kind of school choice debate. And I've said this over and over again. I will say it, that I think school choice, the idea of it and its inception, where you have the ability, if you have a failing school, to move them to a better school, that is a good idea. But in this kind of upheaval of the culture, it presents a real and present danger. And my spidey sense goes off because of the constant push of Google just moved into Oklahoma, right? They're $75 million and they're taking over all the state data. And now it's the push to then, give state money to private schools to educate children. And so it seems this constant push.
So Oklahoma did that too?
Yep.
Yeah, because Idaho did it, Utah did it. And so schools are accepting a lot of money from Google. And, this is easy for the politicians to be like, yeah, great, we can lower our taxes because Google's paying for it. But as James points out, Google's gonna want something for that. What is it? Is it to push ideology? Is it to track data? It's something. You're going to be paying for it. This choice thing is weird because remember that Homer Simpson episode? It was around like, I don't know, it was a while ago, and they're coming over and they had two aliens that were going to destroy the earth, and they ran as the Republican and the Democrat.
Oh, yes.
And they both said that they were going to destroy, and someone said, oh, I'm going to vote third party. And the guy goes, waste your vote. Yeah. And then one of them wins, and like they're all getting whipped into slavery and stuff. And Homer's like, don't blame me. I voted for not.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a classic. Like, if you don't, school choice is based on a free market. And if you don't have a free and fair market, everything's going to be woke, and Google's going to do this. It's weird. This is the same argument. Like, I like Shuan Head a ton. I think she's awesome. She's great on culture. But what some of the people are meaning, like, why don't we just give the $40 million of Ukraine, like, domestically? Okay, on the surface, that makes sense. But the more and more you do that, as Libby Emmons said at one of our Better Discourse things, I want the government, to say that blank away from my family. Get out, because the more and more the government's going to do daycare and take over this and give subsidies, they get to control what's in the daycare, and more and more gets away from parents. That's, while I sympathize with her, yes, I get it. Yeah, people are hurting. You're going to lose your freedom. And she knows, she understands this cultural, she gets it. She gets how cringe it is.
Well, and I think it's, everybody talks about 1984 and you can see it going that direction, but I think it's a lot of Brave New World, it's the Soma kind of culture of being made so comfortable,
Well, and that you must, the drag kids in the Pride shows reminds me of like a little bit of the orgy porgy, right?
Yes.
That you're in Brave New World, you're actually stigmatized if you're monogamous.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do this. You have to go sleep around. That's what they want. And like, again, people aren't saying, look, you have to have this strict monogamy, but you don't need to celebrate certain things, like the celebrating of abortion, like the idea of safe, legal, and rare. The rare was the most important part. And that was a concession to the conservatives. And they've pulled that concession. What do you think is going to happen?
Exactly.
Like that's a breaking of the contract. And then like, so right now, I think our biggest woke is our biggest social contract fracture right now, but man, this abortion one's it's gonna add on to it, but it's so new that.
Well, and it seems perfectly timed. I get a little bit tinfoil hat, but it's like when you talk about narratives, right? And we knew that this abortion debate was going to happen, or we knew that the abortion thing was coming out 2 months ago when it leaked, but still, the reaction to it when it finally pops was like, nobody knew it was going to happen and everything blows up and it's this huge, and I know the left's going to do that because it was repealed or struck down, but because it was leaked and then the reaction is as such, it goes back to what I think you were saying with the media, that it's like, okay, we're going to take something that might be controversial, but we are going to make money off of that. We are going to
make it most controversial.
Right. And to what end, other than just profit? Or is it because I don't believe that a lot
of you can make political hay on this. Like you need to say this is important. Matt Taibbi, did you read Hate Inc. by Matt Taibbi?
Yes.
He talks about the huckster salesman. You go down, he goes, imagine like, this alley. And he's like, hey, do you hear what they're doing? Do you hear what they said? Hey, oh my God, I didn't like that. Come here, come on with me, do some shopping on the way. There's all kinds of stuff laid out. And then they encourage you, to tweet about it, to like do more. You really want to get involved? We can tell you even more stuff to say. We've got to get the word out. And then they get your activist base to move up. So the news isn't just the news anymore. It's actually, let's do this, let's do that, let's go out and protest. It's more than like what he says, the Walter Cronkite tagline of, and that's the way it is, which meant for the next 23 hours, you can go about your life and not worry about the news. Where now it's, no, you need to devote a significant amount of time to the news. And for like junkies, that's fine. But man, for normies, that's not good.
Right. Well, it does something to your mind because you can't process just normal everyday things if you're constantly worried about the giant existential threats always being thrown at you. And that does a lot to the mental health. And I think when you see the rise of mental health issues, but when you see the rise of mental health issues in conjunction with this stuff, we got to start asking the question, okay, do we think we should put an iPad in the hands of every child in every school, and have them using it every single day, which is what, when you have companies like Google that come in and start getting involved, they're going to want to push that because it's a way to capture a market early and keep them there always. And now we have governments pushing that as well in a public-private partnership. Yeah, and that's very concerning.
I know. And then these companies, right? If these companies were neutral, I have a little bit less of an issue with it because they're not going to be pushing anything other than say math or reading or whatever they're doing. The data collection is one thing, but Google also has their own ideology. Yeah. So it's getting really weird. ESGs are another way to enforce that ideology. Yeah. So I don't
ESG
like it.
Is, I think, at the
what does the
heart
right have? You have a few coffee companies, some shaving companies, and Goya Foods.
Right. Yeah. What is it? What was it? The Demolition Man back in the day with Sylvester Stallone when they talked about all of the fast food wars and Taco Bell was the only thing that was left. I mean, but
I forgot about that.
I think about that movie a lot because you would get the little the dings that you had to pull out of the wall like tickets when you would say the wrong
All the
thing.
swear words, yeah.
Yeah, the swear words, and I think about that.
So he's using them as toilet paper because he doesn't know how to run the seashells.
Yeah.
Which they never explain how to do.
Well,
Right.
yeah.
It's great, but they actually perfectly capture like woke ideology, being pious, and that you have to do all this stuff that's largely unpopular, but it's strictly regulated. And the people that are pushing it don't actually follow it.
Right.
Like, it's one thing if
Yes.
that creepy old guy that's the villain actually like believes in his thing, because it's one thing to have like a religious priest that really believes. Okay, well, you believe, but man, as soon as you're crooked, like it's
Well, and that brings me right, because the critique on religion, especially coming out of, the history of the Catholic Church, or, as it dominated society, was that, you had them kind of bestowing these rules upon the people while not following it themselves. And that is what has undermined religion in the minds of people over time, which is hypocrites.
Well, it led to the Protestant Reformation, like that Pope Alexander the Sixtus. Did you watch the Borgias?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So that was a great show. Like his reign is so bad. He has 4 kids. He's the priest, right? Come on, right? And not only that, he has multiple mistresses, and he's got his old wife, which is his mistress, and then it's not his wife, but it's his mistress. He's had 4 kids with. Now he's hooking up with Julia Farnese, the most beautiful woman in all of Rome, and they're poisoning people. It's just it's wild. Like Luther, and they saw this stuff, and they were like, absolutely not. Something's wrong.
Well, and I think I'm hoping that's where we are getting with the woke issue, because I think you see a lot of that same, maybe not, you see a lot of the hypocrisy in what they do and what they push, because it's okay for them to discriminate. It's not okay for you to discriminate. It's always this unequal.
Right. But look what happened. I mean, in that case, everybody started to break up. You had the Protestant Revolution, and then everyone started to break multiple breaks. You do have, like, say, Philip, like post Ferdinand, trying to unify this, trying to stop Protestantism, but Spain eventually, once they get to the 1600s, just they get beaten in the Armada, and then they're on the downhill ever since. Yeah. So Catholicism never covers. Like woke seems like in this Reconquista phase in the 50s or something, and they keep pushing the Moors south. That's where we feel like where we are right now.
Well, and I want to, I don't want to take up too much of your time, and I really appreciate you being here, but you constantly hearing about this notion of civil war. Okay. And I hate talking about it because it's like our national divorce, because I've subscribe to the idea that the more you mention divorce in a marriage, the more likely it is you're gonna have one. And I believe that if there are nefarious actors, whether it's the WEF, you're talking about China, you're talking about Russia, whatever bad guy you want to pick that's outside of the United States of America and what it is that we want to have as a country, right? That they will benefit by us dissolving. They just want to be power brokers. The WF wants to be power brokers. Yeah, absolutely. That's primarily what they're interested. But China, I don't know. They would want to break us up in so much that might benefit them. China, though, they absolutely want to break us up. So yeah, this China is loving this division. Is the WEF? They might. It's harder to say whether they want to split up. They want us to be doing what they want us to do. But China, absolutely, they're dividing. The Mongols did this too. They used to send, they didn't have social media, but they would send their people in 5 years in advance to sow discord. And then their factions might even fight a small civil war prior, but the Mongols would show up and then say, all right, pro-Mongol side, you come out here, you're going to fight the anti-Mongol side. Guess what? You're going to be in the front lines, and then they wipe it out. They were very, very smart. Now China's doing this. They know this. Their colonels wrote the Unrestricted Warfare, and which is an excellent book. They point out that we didn't learn the lesson from the Second Gulf War. We did an amazing job technologically and all of this stuff, and the Air Force and the Army integrated well. But there will not be a war like that. Like the next war is going to be fought on a completely different battlefield. And this is tech, propaganda, computer hacking. All this kind of stuff is massive. Like the nukes, it's hard to use a nuke. You can't use a nuke, like the public opinion, but it's really hard to use a drone right now without a bad public opinion. So the Chinese are very, very astute in this case, like beat them economically, do all kinds of stuff, undermine the currency and get these people to fight. Yet they insulate their country from all of that.
It's very nationalistic. Everybody's pro-China. You know, don't talk about the pandemic online. They have the Great Firewall. It's amazing. It's better than the Great Wall because it's actually working.
Well, and I've actually heard the some of the propaganda coming out of there where they talk about it a bit as a Great Wall, just society in general, that it's the kind of the new Great Wall. And but I'm glad you brought up the Mongols, and James talks a lot about, you know, the Cultural Revolution. And I feel like the one thing about China, I've worked with a lot of Chinese students, and the one thing that I've always noticed about them is they have a great understanding of what the history is as they know it. And but it's all tactical. It's their idea of history is always lessons about what it is that they can do to be better as a collective than the others. And when you brought up the Mongols, and then I, you know, connect that to what happened in the Cultural Revolution, they remember these lessons, and
they suffered greatly under the Mongols, hugely,
right? And
but in a way that Europe didn't, you know.
Right. And they remember those tactics, and they employ them. People talked about, I study a lot of American history, as you know, and Nixon opens China, and the whole goal was to basically, for lack of a better term, culturally colonize China. And it seems to be the opposite right now, because
it's absolutely the opposite. Yes.
And I think your situation on Twitter, which is kind of what I was talking about, is a representation of that we've locked you down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that is what has made China have the Great Wall. The Great Wall.
Isn't this true? Like one of the first acts that the Nazis did, and Hitler, they passed the some Jewish laws, right? Anti-Jewish laws that they had to quietly repeal because they were too unpopular. And that propaganda had to keep going. It hadn't worked enough. And what they did instead was this public-private partnership to say, they went up to companies like Krupp and these other big industrialists and said, look, you know, you need to fire all these Jews. And they're like, well, but there are CEOs, there's CFOs, there are top engineers. We can't possibly do that. And they're like, look, you're going to need to. One good thing about it is we're going to close out down the Jewish small businesses. So you're going to pick up all that extra business. But if you don't, you're in big trouble. So you just got to do it. And that's what they did. They were able to excise the Jews out of society from a manipulate public-private partnership, as opposed to the laws that later they were able to pass the laws, but you know, that hadn't worked yet. So this is what really, really bugs me about all this, you know, and that's what's happening right now. There's a spurt narrative, and it's really hard to be against it.
And the mirroring is what actually got me connected with James. And like I said, I'm gonna let you go because I know you've got a lot to do, and you're busy trying to get back on Twitter and doing everything that you're doing all over all of the other platforms. And I just want to say this: I really appreciate what you're doing with Better Discourses. I appreciate that you're traveling the country and meeting people and bringing people together. I'm going to get to one of your conferences soon.
Yeah, so we just had that. We helped partner with Minds Festival Ideas to help them out with theirs, and that was really good. Again, Destiny is doing a great job. I really feel that if you're gonna bring people, whether, I don't know what's right and left anymore, but if you have one, you really should try to invite people to disagree, to talk in good faith. I don't like, you know, everybody's good in practice. The question is, are you so good when somebody's trying to intercept the pass or block your shot? Like that's, you want to play against defense, and it really helps. It also normalizes the fact that everybody's there and you have a diverse audience politically. It means, yeah, you're allowed to have friends. You're allowed to go out and drink and party with people that don't think like you. So half of the stuff is just normalizing cross friendships, because that is necessary for trust. The idea that there's just one thing I learned from this red book of sales. Now I just thought it's like the communist, the little red book. There was one smart thing they wrote in there, and some salesman goes, my customers don't need to respect me. They don't need to like me. They just need to respect me. And he said, this is the worst ever. Your customers must like you, because like begets trust, and trust gets the business. So if we're the more and more we separate into bubbles, the less you're going to be able to build any kind of trust. Yeah, they don't need to respect your argument. They do need to like you. So that's, we have to do cross friendships. Religion helped that a little bit too, because the Catholic Church, it's not all Republicans. There's tons of but we're all Catholic. So it could be a gluing force. We're seeing that come undone. So, you know, I'm dismayed with the breakdown of religion as well. So.
And I think the idea, and for my audience that are believers, because there is this notion from Christians that atheists just want to do away with Christianity, and I like
The militants do. They're right on the militants, but
yes, but that is a small subset of a small subset, of people in the country, and
it might be all of them now, but
yeah, but
the people that were hanging out with us were different. Yeah,
right.
It's just they probably don't identify as atheists anymore. They probably identify as something else.
Right. Well, and I think
go on, I'm interrupting.
No, you talk. I brought you on here to talk. It's the pejorative idea from Christians of atheists, because I've seen a lot of Christians here, because I brought James Lindsay here twice,
yeah.
and he talks a lot to these groups of people, and they'll be really willing to hear what he says, and then there's a certain subset of them that when they hear he's an atheist will just write him off.
Yeah.
It's like, and I try to say, as a believer, I said, you're doing exactly to him what he's warning you that the left is doing to you. And don't try to take the plank out of, the speck out of his eye and the plank. And what you're doing with Better Discourse is what you're doing, I think you've tried to do with MythinformedMKE and your account, is to show people, don't be like this. Let's get together, let's talk. If you disagree, but then come together at the end of the day, have a beer, and laugh and stuff with each other, because you can find the common ground.
Well, you do. You need healthy progressivism and healthy conservatism. And right now, like, both are sick to a degree. The progressivism, in my opinion, is much sicker. But it could be the reverse. And but you need both to be healthy, and those working together will probably get the best result. But not if they're healthy, not if they're unhealthy, and not if they don't talk at all. And right now, it's just invective, and it's so bad. And the thing is, you spook society. Like, when you scare people, like, no one wants. Think about if you're in an army. It's already stressful enough. The last thing you want your army to do is panic and run. Yeah, that nothing good happens when you do that. And we're panicking our population. We're starting to see the results. Child abuse is up. These aren't the healthy people. These are the ones on the margins that were mostly stable, but now it's shaking and bad things happen. So I just, we need an air conditioner, right? We do need to air condition the world a little bit and to bring down the political temperature.
Have you, and this will be my last question for you. Have you felt, you've been off Twitter now for a little while.
On MythInformed, I still have my
yes, but I found that the larger your account, the little more time
you're tweeting more, because you do, like, if you stop, then you'll stop gaining. Once you have a larger account, you're actually tied to it more. You're right.
Have you found that it's cooled you off a little bit, just your mental state, just maybe where you are in a day?
Maybe, I don't know. That's interesting. I should start diarying that, and then if we get put back on and see it. That's actually a good question. I mean, it could be that we just did the Minds Festival of Ideas, so that was really fun and pretty chill. That's a good question. I don't know. Maybe it might. When you spend a lot of time on it, it gets a little crazy.
It does.
That is true. It has to be.
Yeah, well, and I think that's a bit of what I was talking about with the kind of meat grinder of history and our catching up to our technology. But Brian,
part of it is getting content. I used to listen to a lot more videos, so it wasn't just the Twitter posting. We'd be watching critical race theory professors talk to each other and how they're going to implement it and this and that. So you had to do 3 hours of that in order to get like a couple of days of content, and so you don't have to do that as much. So it's probably all of that. So I would say yes to all. It's not the Twitter, it's the constant digging.
That is true, because I know I was just about ready to let you go, but I've got to say this too. You're awesome to talk to, because you kind of get the conversation. I can see why your Better Discourses events are so popular.
They're a lot of fun.
Like to talk,
They're really cool in person. Yeah.
Yeah. But the notion of, it's not just the time you spend on Twitter, because I think a lot of us in our group, or the circles we run in on Twitter, we're looking for information for people to see, so that we can warn them on something, so we can let them know that hey, this isn't just a conspiracy theory. This isn't a tinfoil hat thing. Here's a paper, here's a video, here's a professor, here's a whatever, so you can see that. And that takes a lot of time. And I don't think people who are on Twitter, who are not on Twitter, understand the kind of time that you put in to actually know what you're talking about, number one.
Yeah.
And then
you got to
find,
dig through it. If you're going to like crank a tweet thread out that has, say, 5 embedded videos, man, that's a long, it takes a while.
And if you're going to be educated about it, and that's
yeah, to deliver it correctly. Yeah.
Right. And I talked to James, I said this to James, how he has not just buckled because of the amount of stuff I know he reads, and the like the nitty gritty, the like stuff that just makes your brain turn to mush if you try to read a paragraph of it. He just digests all that. And I think his constitution was built for it. And thank the gods, or thank God for that, is what I do. But that there are people like that go in, that have the constitution, that have the brain power, the intelligence, and then the ability to communicate it.
Yeah, that's what I'm most impressed with, is the ability to communicate it. Once you get to the super high level, like talk to neurosurgery or these super subspecialties, really hard to relate it all down because there's so many layers. And think about if you're going to teach somebody this, you don't even know where to start because there's so many mixing parts. And what order you teach this in, like he does a really good job. And I think this because he learned it relatively recently, but he can reverse the learn. So yeah, kudos to him. Like,
and he spends a lot of time actually out there talking to people.
Yeah,
that's the other part. It's, I mean, when he's gonna, math intelligence, beyond the pale. Like, I mean, I can't even understand the title of his freaking dissertation, right? But what I've seen him do that I think a lot of the other maybe more well-established woke dissidents, if you want to say, don't do, is they don't spend any time on the ground, or as much time on the ground with the people who are actually dealing with the problems. And that's what I really appreciate about him. I think that's why I really appreciated your account on Twitter, and that's how I got to know you and what you're doing with Better Discourses, is the people who spend the time on the ground with people that are actually going through this do have a better way of communicating. And so I would encourage everybody to, first of all, give Brian Edwards's Twitter account. What's your
it's Brian Edward MKE, and like that's our airport code in Milwaukee. I thought that was cool. I realize it's like really lame now, but
well, I always saw it as Mike, to be honest.
I know everyone says Mike then too, so I'm like, okay, it's a good way.
It works. But follow him there. Let's get that account up. Give to his Give, Send, Go. I'm going to include it in the description for the video here, and look for his Better Discourses events. You don't have to be a Twitter person. You don't have to be a YouTube person. You don't have to be a name or anybody to go to.
I check all of I have open DMs, and I check all of this stuff, even if you're not a mutual follow, because we look, if people are saying, hey, like you should be talking about this more, or have a conversation about this, that's absolutely want to hear from you, because that's how we plan the events. So what should we be talking about? So we all of our events too, we have 1 hour and a half long panels at Better Discourse, and then 25 minutes on top of that for Q&A. Because you want audience to be able to go. And the audience feels like, well, you didn't talk about the thing that's the most important to me. Boom, you can throw it on stage. And that's what's awesome. And some of those, some of the Q&A are the most fun part of it.
Yeah, I've watched some of the videos and stuff that have come out of it, and just so you know, I get jealous that I can't be there. But I'm going to go.
Everyone has a blast, and like we stay out till like 4 in the morning. So, cool.
Well, thank you so much, Brian, for being here, and keep doing what you're doing. And we are going to get you back on Twitter. I'm firmly convinced of it. All right, thank you so much for being here.
I appreciate it.